YouTube always takes a few seconds, but there we are live on YouTube, and then we are gonna go live on Facebook. And we should be live on Facebook, Mike, if you can see it.
All right, I'll look for it.
All right, everyone. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and my website, mvtonline.com. I am Dr. Mike. My credentials you can find also on my website, mikevantielen.com or mvtonline.com. Today we have with us Mike Brodsky, and obviously we have him joining us from Orlando, Florida, from his office in Orlando. Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Great, Dr. Mike. How are you doing?
Very good. So Mike here is a financial advisor, an author, and also a speaker. And he authored one of the great books that I have recently read. And that book is titled Incremental Improvements, changing your life one small step at the time. And actually, this book was #1 on the Amazon personal transformation list, even as recently as September of last year, September of 2019. So congratulations on that, Mike. And that's really, you're welcome. And that's really what we want to focus on today, on making those changes, those incremental improvements in your life. So Mike, tell us a little bit more about this topic and about your book.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the concept of incremental improvements, a lot of people are probably familiar with the idea. You might have heard of it as baby steps or small steps. There's even a Japanese management philosophy known as Kaizen, which is sort of based on the same idea. But if you think about, for example, New Year's resolutions, think about how many people will make a New Year's resolution, something like, I want to lose 30 pounds, or I want to run a marathon, or I want to be a millionaire, and the reality is sometimes the goal is so great that people become a little bit overwhelmed. As a matter of fact, by Groundhog Day, 80% of all New Year's resolutions will have failed. People just give up.
We see that in the gyms. We see that in the gyms all the time, right?
The gyms, right? I mean, everyone's signing up for the gym the first week or two of the year, and then by February, the gym starts to become empty. But so it's the same concept, just sort of getting people to maybe think a little bit smaller on a day-to-day basis. Think about what things you can do right now. Just what changes can you make today? I get people to think about, instead of thinking about New Year's resolutions, thinking about new day's resolutions. What one thing can you do? What one small step can you take to make a positive change in your own life, or even to make a change in the life of someone else, or even what thing can you do to have an influence on the world as a whole? So that's really the premise of the book, and just getting people to think in smaller steps.
Very good. And if you take smaller steps, Mike, it doesn't feel like a change or something drastic, and so you can make those steps much easier. Is that correct?
Well, that's the whole idea. I think because people become so overwhelmed. I mean, if you use the marathon example, the whole idea of running a marathon. If you've been a couch potato all your life, you're not going to get up and just run a marathon tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. Maybe you start by jogging around the block, and then you try to work your way up to, over a period of time, you run a little bit further until you're running a mile, or then maybe 2 miles a day. And then eventually you get to the point where you can run a 5K. And then keep up with it over a longer period of time. Maybe you can run that marathon, but it's really going to happen one step at a time, one day at a time. But for someone who's trying to lose 30 pounds, you're not going to, even if you starve yourself for the next 24 hours, you're not going to lose 30 pounds, but maybe you figure out a way how to cut maybe 150 calories out of your diet, or improve some of the foods that you're eating. Maybe make some changes, just little changes that you can live with on a day-to-day basis to get you closer to that goal over a longer period of time.
Because it all accumulates, and it accumulates fast, right? Now, you mentioned New Year's resolution, and it's always hard for people to stick to those resolutions. And now we are here in this COVID-19 pandemic, right? And it seems like New Year's been a long time ago, right? And so what if people want to take another shot at that New Year's resolution? Let's call it mid-year's resolution, or let's call it pandemic resolution. What do you recommend for people that want to take another shot?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of people all of a sudden have some extra free time on their hands, and it is a great opportunity to reflect and look at some of the changes that you can make during this time. You know, we see a lot of people that, you know, maybe this is a great opportunity to work on improving your health, to work on improving your diet. We see a lot of folks that, now I know a lot of people have been spending maybe a little bit too much time binge watching TV shows, but maybe use this opportunity to work on learning something new. You know, there are so many classes that you can take online on the internet. You know, even Ivy League universities have a lot of classes that people can take for free. And there are a lot of things that people can learn, or maybe it's a great opportunity to do more reading about subjects that are of interest, or getting creative. We see a lot of people that are maybe turning to art or music. They're learning how to play an instrument, or they're working on just picking up new skills, whether that means learning how to program a computer, or learning how to code, you know, writing apps and things like that. It is a great opportunity to use, if you do have some extra free time during this pandemic,
Yes.
to use that time to do something productive, to better yourself, to make some of those changes in your own life that hopefully can lead to just, you know, improving your own life, and maybe even improving your work situation, your job situation. We see a lot of folks that have been furloughed or may have been laid off from their jobs during this pandemic. And the real question is, do you sit back and wait until your job comes back, or do you proactively look for something new to do, if only during this time until you get the job back, or maybe it takes you on a different career path down the road.
Yep. Change is not always bad, right? Myself, I always want to do a podcast. I got extra time, and here we are, right? So that never would have happened probably, or at least be postponed if this pandemic, you know, wasn't happening. Now, you're also a financial advisor. I also can imagine that many people today, with what's going on, losing their job, are kind of looking at their financing, probably contacting their financial advisor and asking for advice. And maybe it's also a good time to get that organized a little bit better, realizing that things actually can happen.
Yes. Well, that is a good point. I mean, certainly when it comes to money, there are a lot of questions that are popping up right now. You know, hopefully if folks have done proper planning, they're able to kind of get through this time a little bit better. You know, there are certain strategies that seem to be working. You know, the timeless strategies when it comes to investing that still hold true today. But certainly for folks that are having issues with money, think about the kinds of changes that you can make in this environment, whether that means spending a little bit less on certain things where you can cut out a few dollars here and there from your budget, or looking for ways to maybe try to save a few more dollars and maybe take advantage of some of the opportunities that might be out there, given some of the craziness we've been seeing in the markets in general. But it's a great opportunity if you haven't talked to a financial advisor about these kinds of issues. It is a good time to do that.
Yeah, certainly saving money on going to restaurants, Mike. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That's true. People are kind of forced to either make their own meals at home, which saves a lot of money, or just doing takeout from some of the restaurants that have managed to stay open. But what a great example when you think about, for some of these businesses, even just the restaurant that up until a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, never would have dreamed that they'd be doing takeout. Now you have fancy high-end restaurants that all of a sudden are doing takeout because this is the only way they're going to survive.
Yep, they have to. For people who will read your book, Mike, what are some of the things that people can expect to get from your book?
Well, I think the one thing is, you know, that hopefully it helps to trigger some ideas about some of the changes that they can make in their own life. What I often find is people that have read the book will tell me that after reading the book, they were kind of inspired to make a certain change in their life, whether it relates to their health, to exercising, to diet, whether it relates to financial issues, money issues, or even just some of the relationships in their lives, or in their career, some of the job changes that people have been inspired to undertake, or even just improving their education. You know, going back to school to get a graduate degree, or learning something new online. There are so many things that the book goes through, a lot of different subjects, and just sharing some different ideas. And oftentimes people will either take an idea that comes from the book, or in many cases come up with their own incremental improvement and make their own changes about ways to just make a small change in their life that can have a big impact over a longer period of time.
Yeah, what I liked about your book, it's very simple, but it touches with one or two examples on so many areas in life that you do start thinking like, I can do that, I can do that. And so,
Right.
I think it was very well written with lots of examples that make you think, well, I can do this, or this in many aspects of your life. So that's what I certainly liked about your book. Now, I follow you on social media. Obviously, we know each other personally from being involved in the WSA, the World Sports Alumni. And I see that you're really a sports fan. You're always at like these major sports events, and I always wonder, Mike, where do you get these tickets? Because he's always at the forefront of all those sports events. So, Mike, share with our listeners today a few of those maybe cool stories at your sports events.
Well, sure. You're right. We have been connected through World Sports Alumni, and what a great organization. I think we've both been guests on the Brandon Merriweather show, for example.
That's right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a strange environment when right now there really are no sports taking place whatsoever around the world. Hopefully some of that will get restarted pretty soon. But I've had some wonderful opportunities to get connected with the world of sports, obviously through World Sports Alumni, the business board of directors there, but also through Florida Citrus Sports, great organization for any college football fan who's a fan of the ACC, SEC, Big Ten, or Big 12. I've been part of their team selection committee and also known as the scouting committee. That's been a great organization. And being able to scout, in the past, I've scouted some Duke football games. I've met some amazing people through those experiences. Or now that my son is a freshman at South Carolina, even though, of course, he's back home like everybody else right now, taking classes online, I'm hoping to scout some of the South Carolina Gamecocks games going forward. And also, for folks who take a look at my bio, they'll know that I actually have a bit of a TV background. Even though I've been a financial advisor for 23 years now, before that I did spend a few years as a television news producer. So I have that sort of a news background, journalistic background. And I was able to sort of kind of work my way back into to sports journalism just over a year ago. I was able to get a media pass for the Pro Bowl, and in the process ended up breaking a story on Jared Cook, basically, that it was a story that was picked up by Bleacher Report, ESPN, TMZ.
Look at you.
Should I share that story?
Yeah, sure.
Why not? So it was basically, I got the pass from a good friend of mine, Mike Dixon, over at Vegas Sports Daily, and he just wanted me to get an interview with Jared Cook, get some sound with Jared Cook, who at the time was the only Raiders player in the Pro Bowl. This is in 2019. And Jared Cook, if you remember, in January 2019, there was a government shutdown. And Jared Cook talked about how he gave an interview for me exclusively because I sort of overheard him telling somebody else the story and got him to tell me on camera about how when he flew into Orlando, he said, "Oh yeah, these TSA agents, they broke into my luggage, they took my shoes, they took my clothes. But when you're not paying these guys, what do you expect?" And it was a great soundbite. But of course, it was a big story. I mean, at the time, the whole thought of TSA agents breaking into your luggage and stealing things to pay themselves when they weren't getting paid by the government was a big story. So that kind of launched a bit of a renaissance for my connection to the world of sports. Sense that I was able to go back and cover the Pro Bowl once again. I also was able to cover the Diamond Resorts Invitational Golf Tournament. Got some great interviews there, and then as recently as this past Super Bowl, just a few months ago, I was there for the week of Super Bowl events
in Miami, right?
The evening for the NFL honors on the red carpet, which was an amazing opportunity to interview some Hall of Famers and have some amazing experiences. So if you check out my social media, you can kind of see what Dr. Mike is talking about.
So you just kind of go back into it, and suddenly you're already on the top, just like that.
It was great after being out of the business for decades to come back in and break a story like that was It was unbelievable.
Meant to be, I guess, Mike. But when people look at your social media, what they also will see is that you're always involved with many local charities. And
Yes.
so I think that's a great thing. Obviously, me and you have been of many of those charities, like the Mustard Seed, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the people that are listening, do you have any advice for them to maybe do more volunteer work and be part of those charities?
I think that's an excellent point, especially at a time like this. As you know, and I certainly do appreciate your involvement in helping out the Mustard Seed of Central Florida. I know you've been to our Chairs for Charity event, which unfortunately keeps getting postponed because of this pandemic here.
Yeah.
But I'm currently the vice chair of the Mustard Seed of Central Florida, the Furniture and Clothing Bank. And I will say the charity is still up and running. Obviously, they've had to make a lot of changes to the operation because of the COVID-19 conditions here. But, in this environment, there are still a lot of charities that are being pressed even harder, trying to keep people, in the case of Mustard Seed, obviously making sure that people have furniture, making sure they have clothing. And there are other charities that focus on feeding people, keeping them fed. And certainly that's an area that's going to be needed with unemployment through the roof right now. I mean, there are going to be a lot of folks that are going to need help. So for anyone that's out there, if you have the time to give back and help some of the charities here in Central Florida, I would strongly encourage it. Lots of great opportunities to get involved and giving back to the community.
No, I agree. And the more you get involved with that and the more you give back, Mike, it's you're doing yourself a huge favor. I mean, how good do you feel when you're doing something like that? So yeah, it's about helping others, but people don't realize how much you help yourself as a person when you do give back.
Yeah, well, that is a good point. I mean, certainly, whether you think of it in terms of karma or even just law of reciprocity, I think if you're good to other people, people have a tendency to be good back to you. You put good things out into the world, and hopefully you'll get some of that good karma back. So, obviously, there are benefits to helping other people. And I think it's important that people really think in that way. And again, coming back to what I talked about in the book, this whole idea of just really every day, what one thing can you do to make your own life a little better, to make someone else's life a little better, and to make the world a little better? It really comes back to that basic premise in the book.
Yeah. I mean, and everybody had this experience, I guess, even when you come in a situation where you kind of hold the door open for another person, you have that instant feeling of feeling better about yourself. And so what if you can replicate that feeling more times during the day and for the rest of your life, right?
Absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, it does have an impact. And I certainly would encourage, if people aren't already doing that, that's a great change to make, to try to think about ways to give back. To help
I agree.
Be kind, be good to others.
Let's get back to your book, because that's what we were here for, right? we're going off, but it's been fun. Sports, charities. But I'm guessing, Mike, that if you write a book on incremental improvements, you must have, incorporated or implemented a lot of those principles yourself. You mentioned earlier you've worked in TV. So how did you get then from TV to being a financial advisor?
Well, it's an excellent question. I think the bigger question that often comes up is really, what was I doing in TV? If you look back at my background, I majored in economics at Yale. I got my MBA from Duke. And it's funny, it was actually at Duke that I sort of discovered television. There was a TV show that I started called, and this is at the Fuqua School of Business, so the name will make sense in a moment. But the TV show is now known as Fuqua Vision. It's essentially a sketch comedy show that we had started about 29 years ago. It's actually still on the air, and even though the episodes were supposed to be canceled, interestingly enough, there will be an episode coming Friday night, May 1st. They actually put together a new episode that will be broadcast online. We actually just shot something last weekend for it, and they're putting together some more content. So the show's still going strong. It's nice to have that sort of a legacy. They call me the godfather of Fuqua Vision.
Oh, look at you.
Cool. At Duke, still going on. But from there, I was able to get an opportunity to work in television in West Palm Beach as a news producer. I think they looked at me as kind of an unusual case. They're used to having people that come with journalism backgrounds. Here I am coming with an economics degree from Yale and an MBA from Duke. They kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, we'll give you a shot. Let's see what you can do. So I did it and kind of worked my way up through the ranks. It was a lot of fun. Had an amazing time, amazing experiences, met some amazing people, and I got some great stories out of it over the years that if we have time, maybe we'll share some. But I did, after a period of time, I also kind of recognized that TV was great, but it's also it's challenging in terms of the crazy hours, the crazy shifts that you have to be willing to work, being willing to work holidays and weekends. So around the time that I was getting married, I also recognized, once I got here to Orlando, I realized that TV, to get where I wanted to get in TV, I'd have to be willing to keep moving around the country from market to market. And I knew that Orlando would be a great place to raise a family, so I actually decided to go for a bit of a change. And I kind of decided, I knew I had learned a lot about what I'm currently doing as a financial advisor. I'd even interned with Shearson Lehman Hutton back in the day. So my wife and I got married, and after our honeymoon in Vegas, came back on a Saturday. By Monday, I was starting at Smith Barney Winter Park, and that was 23 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. Well, but I was able to take a lot of the lessons that I learned from TV and brought them into what I do currently as a financial advisor.
All right, excellent. This platform of the podcast is obviously a lot to do with health, educating people on how to be healthier and wellness. And that's the majority of what we do on these podcasts. So in your book too, again, you touch on many different areas of life, but one of them is weight loss and health and lifestyle changes. Can you share with our viewers a few of examples of incremental steps that we can take to change our health or lifestyle? Like, so they get an idea of a few examples.
Yeah, just a couple of quick examples. And I know that I'm sure you can certainly expound on this, talk more about it. But, you know, when it comes to, for example, diet, I think the biggest challenge a lot of people have is they hear about a certain diet plan. And the diet basically says you can't eat this and you can't eat that. You got to cut this out of your diet. You can never eat it ever again. And most people will look at that and say, well, gee, I really like eating that particular food. Maybe I'll just forget about this whole diet thing. So the idea in the book is sort of figuring out what are you willing to commit to, and just getting people to think about what changes you can make that you're actually going to stick with, that you're actually going to implement. So if there are certain foods that, let's face it, we all kind of know what foods are good for us and what foods are bad for us. Now, the reality is a lot of people may not be willing to give up some of those bad foods entirely, but maybe there are ways you can cut back on them, reduce the amount that you're consuming, or reduce how often you're eating those bad foods, and get to the point where at least you can figure out how to make some changes on a positive way. What changes can you make to your diet that you're willing to stick with and that you're willing to live with, where you can cut some calories out of your diet, improve some of the foods that you're eating, reduce the fried foods, replace them with grilled foods. Do you have any practical example, like something more practical? Just an example out of the blue. Well, sure. So, you know, for example, when it comes to, let's face it, like certainly any kind of desserts with lots of sugar and that sort of thing, you know, you don't necessarily have to eat the entire slice of cheesecake. Maybe you just have a little bite, maybe just pass it on to the other folks that you're with and let them enjoy some of it, you know, sharing desserts that way. Or for someone who, if they find themselves going to the drive-thrus, especially now with all this takeout, if they're buying fried chicken or fried foods, you know, see if there's a grilled option, or see if there's something else that's a little bit healthier that you might be able to
or
get.
Or regular size versus the biggie size, maybe too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, forget about the biggie size. Go with just you know, get rid of the French fries. Forget about those. Or there are obviously changes that people can make that would have a major impact. And certainly, I'm sure that you can share from some of your own books some of the ideas. I think you even have some sort of essentially checklists kind of set up about things people can do from a health standpoint, from a diet standpoint, right?
No, yes, I like the idea of smaller steps because people can be compliant with that. They can be in charge and in control of it too, versus following something that somebody tells you to do. It's always a lot harder than something you decide yourself and control yourself. In my book, the Health for Life book that I published in 2018, 2014, the last chapter is basically an action plan, and it's pages and pages of check off boxes. And so there's no time limit. Some people will implement all of it in a month, and other people take maybe a whole year to get to that last implementation. So it's kind of similar, but I like your idea to make it really small steps. Some of my steps are probably big steps for most people, right? So
Okay.
I certainly like that concept. But when it comes to health and lifestyle, what I want to add to this is that our government, our organizations like the American Heart Association, the ADA, the American Diabetic Association, the Cancer Association, many times the nutritional information they provide is in contradiction with what scientific research tells us what's healthy and not healthy. And that's because, Mike, there's a conflict of interest. A good example, a simple example, is that of diabetes. There's many studies out there, one in particular, a Harvard study that was published that shows that when we eat only one serving of processed meats per day, your risk of diabetes increases by 51%. Okay? So now, if you become a diabetic and you go to the ADA website because they have meal plans there, then you're thinking, okay, I follow these meal plans to benefit my diabetes. But if you look at the meal plans, they all have meat and processed meats in it. So then you wonder, why are they recommending, certain foods that have been proven scientifically to be detrimental to diabetes? And then the answer is, well, who are the sponsors? And then you'll find out it's Bumblebee, Oscar Mayer, etc., etc. So there's a huge conflict of interest. So for the listeners today, yes, you can make those incremental improvements, but do a little bit of research on which foods really are healthy for you in general or specifically for your medical condition, because an incremental improvement could be to take less processed meats on a daily basis if you have diabetes, right? But the ADA website will not tell you that. They actually will promote it. So always be a little bit skeptic, ask questions, maybe talk to somebody like me or somebody that has a background in nutrition. I have a PhD in nutrition, to make sure you make those right incremental improvements, right? You can make efforts, but you got to make sure those efforts will benefit you and not be detrimental to your health.
That's a good point. I mean, certainly in the book, one of the things I talk about is the importance of talking to experts, talking to professionals about these kinds of changes. I think it's important to get the experts' opinions and listen to what they have to say. Do your research, do your homework, certainly, and then figure out how to make those changes in your life, but make the right changes and do them in a way that you're actually going to stick with. Because certainly if folks are listening to the experts, but then they realize, I'm never going to do what that person's telling me to do, the change is never going to happen. So it's important to kind of find experts that are, giving them the right information about ways to eat healthier and to be healthier, but also then figuring out how to start making those changes in their life. And again, maybe just taking one step at a time rather than trying to bombard themselves with too many changes all at once that are going to become overwhelming, and just making those changes in a more manageable way.
Yeah, you can't expect a transformation overnight. It's got to be step by step. Mike, any final advice or words of wisdom for the listeners today?
Well, sure. One thing that I also like to talk about is this concept of what I call self-complexity. And there was an interesting study that was done. And when you think about most people, I know there were a lot of folks that up until this whole COVID-19 hit, a lot of them thought of themselves as a business person or an entrepreneur. And there was a study that was done that found that folks who kind of see themselves in only that one way tend to be a little bit more devastated when there's a setback or a negative experience in their business or professional life. So, for example, I've always thought of myself as, yes, I'm a financial advisor, but I'm also an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a volunteer, I'm a mentor, a sports fan. And so for folks who see themselves with more self-complexity, that they see themselves as a multidimensional person, the study was done that basically found that those folks are able to bounce back more quickly after a setback, and folks with greater self-complexity are also less likely to become sick or even to experience depression or stress. So at a time like this, during this pandemic, I would encourage everyone to really think about ways to make some of those changes in your life, to see yourself as a more complex person, see yourself in a multi-dimensional way, and use this as an opportunity to really improve your life, and hopefully make some changes that will stick.
That sounds actually great, because it makes sense, right? You're a financial advisor, so you're looking at yourself as a diverse portfolio instead of just right. And so when something goes bad, you can focus on the things that are good.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly.
Excellent.
So if you're having problems or challenges in business, which right now a lot of folks are experiencing, you're able to realize that there's more to life than just that business.
Yes.
There are other ways that you can contribute to society. And I think this is a great reminder for everybody, as we all deal with this pandemic, that we're all still connected and we're all still here to help each other, and we're all going to get through this together.
Yes, excellent. Tell the listeners where they can get a copy of your book, Mike.
Absolutely. So again, the book, Incremental Improvements, is available at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You can also, if you, for those who are Apple users, you can get it from the iTunes store as well, the iTunes book version of this, the iBook version. But I'll also mention, for anybody that goes to my website, incrementalimprovements.com, you can actually download the PDF version for free. So again, that's just www.incrementalimprovements.com. If you want to just get it for free, you're certainly more than welcome to do that. And anybody who'd like to follow me on social media, you can look for me on Facebook under Mike Brodsky FL is the personal page. I've also, from there, you can sort of link over to either my book page or my financial advisor page. I'm on Instagram at Mike_Brodsky, and you can also find me on LinkedIn as well. I certainly look forward to connecting with folks and wish everyone the best in making changes in their own lives.
That sounds great. And in my books, it always says if you make those incremental improvements, if you have success stories, share them with Mike, because for the second edition, he likes to have some more stories and some more things that worked. And if you have questions, again, contact him, talk about him. If you want to be involved in local charities, he's on many of the boards, so feel free to reach out to Mike. He's just a great person. I've had the honor to start to know him more and more over the last year, and I love this guy. Mike, thank you very much for coming on and sharing this wealth of information with our viewers today.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast, and I wish you the best with your incremental improvement that you've made. Certainly the podcast.
Well, one of the improvements I have to make, I have to manage my finances better, so I may come and visit you soon anyways.
That sounds good. I'm more than happy to help with that.
All right, viewers, this was our podcast today with Mike Brodsky, author, financial advisor, and speaker. Tomorrow, we have a very interesting podcast coming up. We have Jody Bear here. She's a cancer survivor, stage 4 melanoma. And we will have a controversial talk, most likely, about cancer, the cancer industry, the oncologist, natural treatments, some research. So it will be very interesting to tune in tomorrow. Again, I am Dr. Mike. Choose health freedom.